The first thing Aeralyn noticed was the sound. Wings had a sound, always had. A soft, living hum as aether threaded through membrane and bone. The rustle of wind against feathers, the faint chiming of the air itself when she caught a strong updraft. The wings she was testing that morning did not hum, they whined. "Too sharp," she muttered, squinting at the dial on the obsidian bracer strapped around her forearm. The needle jittered near the red line, fluttery and impatient. "You're drinking too much current, you greedy thing." The harness hugging her shoulders was all brass and crystal, polished to a gleam, with 4 slender mechanical wing frames fanned out behind her natural wings. Each was strung with gossamer filaments, half spun silver, half condensed light that shimmered faintly whenever she shifted. Below, the chasm yawned, deep and cloud-wreathed. The workshop balcony jutted out into open air from the side of the cliff, just one of many platforms that made up the lower tiers of Lyron's spire. Above her, the main city towered, bridges and terraces layered like petals, Fae gliding between them on colorful wings. Sunlight glittered on stained glass and aether lamps. "Maybe," Aeralyn told the contraption on her back, "if you didn't overcorrect every time I breathe." She flexed her fingers. The runes in the bracer pulsed. The metallic wing frames adjusted, adding a subtle buoyancy to her stance. The breeze lifted under her feathers, eager. Liessa's voice drifted from the workshop door. "You know, some of us choose to stay on solid ground out of basic self-preservation." Aeralyn glanced back over her shoulder. Liessa leaned against the doorframe, copper curls pinned loosely atop her head, apron smeared in herb stains. She held a steaming mug between both hands, watching Aeralyn with a blend of worry and resigned amusement. "You said that when I designed the gliding harness," Aeralyn said, "and the updraft funnels, and the storm sail. Has anything you've strapped to your body been entirely safe?" "A few things," Aeralyn thought about it. "Probably." Liessa sighed. "Just remember your promise. If the gauge hits the red—" "I bail," Aeralyn finished. "Yes, Mother." "You mock now, but I'm the one who'll have to gather your pieces if you splatter." Aeralyn smiled, just a little. That was the thing she loved about Liessa. Even her threats carried the shape of care. "All right," Aeralyn said, more to herself than anyone else. "Test Flight 3. Incremental support. Maximum output at 60% of yesterday's load." She flipped the catch on the bracer. The world sharpened. Aether surged through the runes, into the filaments, down the wing frames. The contraption shuddered once, then settled into a steady vibration. The whine softened into something closer to a purr. The breezes around her woke up. Aeralyn stepped off the balcony. Gravity caught her in its familiar, stomach-dropping fist. Wind roared past her ears, tearing at her braids, flattening her tunic to her body. For a heartbeat, she fell like any stone. Then her natural wings snapped wide, iridescent blue and silver catching the air. The mechanical frames fanned with them, amplifying the lift. The harness hummed against her spine. She rose, like it was nothing, like she had always been meant to. A laugh tore itself out of her chest, bright and sharp. "Yes," she breathed, angling her wings. The mechanical frames adjusted in perfect mirror. "Come on, show me what you've got." She banked in a broad circle around the spire. The extra lift from the mechanical wings felt strange. Not wrong exactly, but like she'd suddenly grown an extra pair of limbs that didn't quite know their place yet. Every minor twitch sent a ripple through the system. Tiny overcorrections she had to anticipate and counterbalance. But the potential! She skimmed along the outer terraces, close enough to see Faye pause and stare. A child leaned over a railing, eyes wide. Aeralyn tipped her wings and gave them a quick, showy spin, harness whirring as it bled off excess aether. "Show off," Liessa would say. Aeralyn couldn't hear her from here, but she could imagine it well enough. As she climbed higher, the air thinned and cooled. Aether currents swirled around Lyran's spire like invisible rivers, shimmering against her skin. The harness translated them into gentle pulses at her shoulders, suggesting directions. For the first time since she'd started this project, it felt like more than theory. Imagine fleets of couriers who never tire, fae who've injured their wings flying again, allies without wings joining them in the sky. A world less bound by gravity. Aeralyn angled upward, testing the upper limits of the harness's output. The bracer's needle inched closer to orange. The filaments brightened, light flickering between the frames like captured lightning. "Steady," she murmured. Cloud wisps brushed against her boots. The highest towers of the city were level with her now, their glass domes gleaming. The sun sat just above them, a molten coin in the sky. The needle brushed the red line. "Too much," she said. She flicked her wrist, signaling the harness to ease off. The needle spiked. The harness screamed. Pain lanced down her spine like a lightning strike. The wing frames convulsed, twisting out of sync with her natural wings. For a dizzying instant, lift and gravity warred in wild, jittering surges. A crack exploded behind her. Aeralyn's world turned to fire. The aether crystals slotted into the harness, shattered, flooding her back with raw, uncontrolled energy. Heat blossomed across her shoulder blades. Not just heat, but tearing, searing agony. Her wings! Her wings! She heard herself scream, but it sounded distant, like someone else's voice. The sky tilted, the spire spun, wind slammed into her from every direction, a howling, chaotic vortex. One of the mechanical frames snapped free, spinning away in a trail of sparks. She smelled burning feathers. Then there was only falling. The world narrowed to a strip of blue and stone and blazing pain. Her body refused to obey any command. Her wings, the instinct she had trusted since infancy, refused to answer. I can't feel." Something slammed into her side, diverting her trajectory. Aeralyn glimpsed a flash of stone, of glowing runes embedded into the cliff face. Then she was breaking through a layer of illusory rock and into sudden darkness. Arms caught her, barely. Momentum drove them both onto a hard metal surface. Her vision fractured into shards of light. Through the haze, she saw a face above her, pale, angular, framed in dark hair pulled carelessly back. Eyes the silver blue of stormlight, wide in shock. An unfamiliar voice, low and rough, said her name like a question. "Aeralyn?" She tried to answer. Blood roared in her ears. The last thing she felt was the sickening weightlessness of her ruined wings. And then the world went out. She woke to stillness. For a moment, Aeralyn thought she was suspended in the air. There was that strange floating sensation, the absence of solid ground beneath her feet. No wind, no sound. Then the stillness sharpened into sensation. Soft linen against her bare arms. The muted scent of herbs and heated metal. A faint vibration thrumming through the surface she lay on, like distant machinery. Memory flooded back in jagged pieces. The flight, the red line, the explosion. Her wings. Her eyes flew open. The ceiling above her was domed and ribbed with copper struts, etched with runes that pulsed faintly. Lanterns hung from the arches, their light refracted through smoky crystal. Shadows of gears and pipes crawled across the stone walls. She lay on a padded table, half sat upright by a wedge of cushions. Someone had stripped her down to a simple linen shift. Bandages wrapped her shoulders and chest in tight, meticulous layers. Her back felt wrong, heavy and numb and burning all at once. "Aeralyn?" Lyessa's voice came from her left, strained and small. Aeralyn turned her head. Lyessa sat in a chair by the table, her usually neat curls frizzed around her face, apron discarded, fingers twisted hard into the fabric of her skirt. Her eyes were swollen and red. "Lie," Aeralyn rasped. Her throat hurt. Lyessa let out a sound halfway between a laugh and a sob. "You fell out of the sky, that's what happened. You ignited half the lower aether stream doing it." "That's dramatic," Aeralyn managed. "You were on fire, Era," Lyessa's voice broke. "That's not dramatic." That's accurate." Aeralyn's heart pounded faster, matching the ache in her back. "My wings," she whispered. "I can't feel them." Lyessa looked away. No. The word wasn't spoken aloud, but it ran through Aeralyn like a current, stripping warmth as it went. She tried to shift her shoulders. Pain flared, a deep, raw bloom, but not in the way she knew. Not feathers snagging, not muscles flexing. Dull and wrong. Her hands trembled. "Tell me," Lyessa swallowed. "The explosion shredded them. The healers did everything they could, Era. They saved you. But—" She took a breath, like each word weighed a stone. "They couldn't save your wings." For a second, there was nothing. No sound, no breath, no heartbeat. Just the flat, impossible statement hanging between them. Then the world roared back in, and Aeralyn's chest clenched around a sound she refused to let out. Her wings. Her wings that had carried her up the storm columns as a child, that had folded around her when she was cold, that had caught every aether current like a second heartbeat. They were gone. Air pressed in around her. The dome seemed to shrink. She dug her fingers into the padded edge of the table, needing something to anchor her. "This is a joke," she said, the words rough. "Lyessa, this isn't—" Lyessa's face crumpled. "I'm so sorry." Aeralyn shook her head hard, as if she could dislodge the reality and fling it away. All she dislodged was fresh pain. Tears blurred her vision. She blinked them back, furious. She was Fae. Fae didn't exist without wings. They were not decoration. They were identity, birthright, magic. "What good is an engineer who can't fly?" she muttered. Lyessa flinched. "You're alive. That's what matters." "It doesn't feel like it," Aeralyn said, before she could stop herself. The honesty of it scraped like glass. Silence fell. Somewhere, beyond the curved walls, something clanked and hissed. A large mechanism shifting. This wasn't the healer's hall, she realized. It was too full of metal and magic, the air too thick with aether scent. "Where are we?" she asked. Lyessa straightened a little. "The lower artificer's wing," she said. "Prince Corin's private workshop." Aeralyn stared. "I fell into Corin Vaylor's workshop? You crashed through his protective illusion like a meteor. Gave everyone a fright. Including him, I think, though you'd never know it to look at his face." Memories of that split-second image, pale skin, storm eyes, stirred at the edge of her mind. Aeralyn swallowed. "The healer said moving you would be dangerous. Your back was very delicate. Prince Corin offered his facilities, his tools, his stabilizing arrays. The High Healer agreed." "That doesn't sound like the brooding recluse everyone gossips about," Aeralyn muttered. "Rumors are like mold," Lyessa said. "They grow best in dark, neglected corners." Before Aeralyn could respond, the door at the far end of the room opened with a soft click. A man stepped in, flanked by the faint whir of clockwork. He was taller than she remembered from that brief, blurred impression before she'd lost consciousness. The lamplight picked out silver threads in his dark hair, pulled back at the nape of his neck. He wore simple, ink-dark sleeves rolled to the elbow, revealing forearms dusted with metal filings and faint burn scars. No crown, no court regalia, just a narrow silver torque at his throat, etched with the sigils of the Aether Court. His eyes, though, those carried his title. Sharp and assessing, stormlit, and old in a way that had nothing to do with years. A small owl-shaped construct perched on his shoulder, gears ticking softly. Its eyes, twin amber lenses, blinked once as it regarded Aeralyn. "Good," the prince said quietly. "You're awake." Lyessa rose and bowed, awkward with worry. "Your Highness?" Aeralyn's instinct fought itself. the drilled-in etiquette of bowing to the prince versus the fact that she was half-bandaged and lying flat. She ended up with something like a stiff nod. "Prince Corin," she said, her voice hoarse, "I seem to have crashed your workshop." His mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "You did that, yes. You also nearly overloaded my primary aether conduit." The owl clicked its beak reproachfully. "I'm very sorry about your conduit," Aeralyn said, the words falling out because all the important ones, my wings, my life, my everything, is ruined, were too dangerous to touch. Corin stepped closer, stopping just short of the table. His gaze tracked over her, not leering, not pitying, but cataloging, healer cool. "How is the pain?" he asked. "Manageable," she lied. Lyessa shot her a look. "It spikes if she breathes too deep, or thinks about moving, or glares too hard." "Lie." "What? I'm helping." "The healers did what they could," Corin said, ignoring their exchange. "They asked my assistance with stabilizing the aether around the injuries. The damage from the explosion was extensive." His voice stayed level, but his jaw tightened slightly as he spoke. "Just say it," Aeralyn said, fingers digging into the padding again. "My wings are gone." Silence pressed in again. Corin held her gaze for a long moment, as if weighing whether honesty would shatter her further. "Yes," he said finally, "they are." The word landed with less force than Lyessa's earlier pronouncement, but it still hurt. Aeralyn stared at the copper struts until they blurred. "If you'll excuse us, Your Highness," Lyessa said, voice brittle, "this is a lot. Perhaps we could discuss anything else later." Corin didn't immediately leave. He studied Aeralyn a moment longer, then said very quietly, "Later may not be soon enough." That made her look at him again. "What do you mean?" she asked. He glanced at Lyessa. "Would you give us a moment?" "She just woke up," Lyessa protested. "I don't think—" "It's all right," Aeralyn said, surprising herself. "I'll be fine." She wasn't sure that was true, but she needed to hear what had that particular seriousness sharpening his tone. Lyessa hesitated. "I'll be right outside," she said to Aeralyn, squeezing her hand. "If he starts talking in runes and coils just to avoid saying something real, I'm coming back in." "I do occasionally use normal words," Corin murmured. "We'll see." Lyessa shot him a thin, polite smile and left, closing the door behind her. The room felt larger without her, quieter. The hum of distant machinery seemed louder. Corin moved to a console at the foot of the table and adjusted a dial. A subtle warmth spread through the cushioning at Aeralyn's back, easing the worst edges of the ache. "Your harness," he said, "was well designed, for the most part." "For the most part," she repeated dryly. "High praise from the Prince of Artifice." "It would have worked at lower outputs," he continued, ignoring the sarcasm. "But you pushed it past safe thresholds. The crystals were not pure enough to handle the surge, and your stabilizing runes were creative." "Creative," she said again, "not dangerously flawed? One can be both." He looked up, meeting her eyes. "I'm telling you this because if we continue, you need to understand exactly what went wrong." Her breath hitched. "Continue? What?" He regarded her for a long moment, then rested his hands lightly on the edge of the table, leaning in just enough that she could see the faint ring of tiredness around his eyes. "You asked what good an engineer who can't fly is," he said. "Assuming you still wish to be one, I may have a way to help you fly again." The words hit like a gust of wind. For a heartbeat, hope fluttered, small, suspicious. "I don't have wings," she said carefully, "in case that detail escaped your notice." "I am aware," he said dryly. "I'm not suggesting regrowth. Even the high healer doesn't promise that. The damage is too severe." He paused, choosing his next words. "I'm suggesting replacement." Aeralyn tried to sit up. Pain flared. Corin's hand came up, not quite touching, but ready to steady her. She stopped herself short, breathing hard. Replacement? She echoed. With what? Illusions? Gliders? I can strap a sail to my back myself. Not illusion. Not gliders. Corin's gaze stayed steady. Wings. Mechanical ones. Artifice. The room seemed to sharpen around the edges. Aeralyn stared at him, trying to see if this was some kind of cruel joke. But if Prince Corin Valor had a reputation, it wasn't for cruelty. It was for impossible constructs that should not work, but somehow did. "You could do that?" she asked, voice low. "You could build wings that fly? For someone who doesn't have?" Her throat closed around the word. "Yes," he said simply. Hope lurched, tried to rise, then slammed into another problem. Even if you could, they wouldn't be the same. I'd have to control them consciously, every moment. No instinct, no feel. It wouldn't be real flight. "You're assuming I haven't considered that challenge." Aeralyn narrowed her eyes. "You have a solution for that too?" "I have a theory," he corrected. "One I've never tested on a scale like this. But your accident and your previous designs give us a starting point." "Us?" she repeated. "If you accept my offer," he said, "this would be a collaboration. Your engineering instincts are valuable. Your understanding of winged flight is more intimate than mine." "More intimate than yours?" she said incredulously. "You have wings, Your Highness. I've seen you fly at ceremonies." "I do," he said, "but I do not fly as you do." Something in his tone made her think of loneliness, of watching storms from behind glass. She filed that away. "All right," she said slowly. "Explain this theory of yours, preferably using some of those normal words Liessa accused you of knowing." His lips curved, almost a smile. "Normal words," he repeated. "Very well." He moved to the side of the table so she wouldn't have to crane her neck so much, and gestured to the bandages on her back. "Your natural wings channeled aether current directly," he said. "They were part of you. Emotion, instinct, magic, all interwoven. Any artifice I attach will not have that advantage. It will be an extension, a very complex tool. But tools, with enough refinement, can feel like part of oneself. A blacksmith's favorite hammer, a scribe's pen. I'd prefer something slightly more essential than a pen," she said. "Which is why we need more than metal and runes," he went on. "We need a direct connection between your aether and the wings. Something that lets them respond to your emotions and instincts the way your natural wings did. That's where my theory comes in." He paused. "Have you studied soul bonding?" Aeralyn frowned. "You mean those old stories where lovers link their hearts and die dramatically?" "Those are the exaggerated tales," Corin said. "The real technique predates most of them. It was originally used to stabilize delicate aether constructs, things too complex to anchor to a single signature. A temporary link between caster and object, or between two casters, allowing for shared control." "I've read about it," Aeralyn admitted, "in passing. No one uses it now." "Almost no one," he agreed. "It is dangerous if mishandled, but in controlled conditions it allows for remarkable precision. If we were to apply a carefully limited soul bond between you and your wings—" "You mean between me and your wings," she said slowly. "Wings you made." His gaze didn't waver. "Between you and the construct I design, yes. But there is another complication. New constructs are unstable. Until they settle into a stable aether pattern, they require a consistent anchor. With something as complex as full-scale wings, with as much aether running through them as your body, one anchor may not be enough to keep them from damaging you." She felt the shape of the implication before he said it. "Two anchors," she said. "You and me." He nodded once. "A triad of sorts. Your aether, mine, and the constructs. at least until the wings fully attune to you. And that requires a soul bond between you and me, he finished quietly. The words hung there, absurd and heavy at once. A soul bond, she repeated, tasting them, between a Fey engineer from the lower tiers and the prince of the Aether Court? I told you the rumors about me being a recluse are exaggerated, he said dryly. No one will be shocked if I retreat further into my work. That's not what She flailed for a moment, then gave up. Do you have any idea what you're actually suggesting? Soul bonds aren't casual. They're not. She flapped a hand, forgetting until pain flared. They're intimate. Yes. No hesitation. They are. You'd feel what I feel, she said. I'd feel what you feel. That's what the stories say. The stories dramatize, he said, but didn't deny. In practice, the link can be limited, directed. It is not a constant flood, but echoes, strong emotions, physical extremes, an awareness of the other's presence. It would not be permanent. Once the wings stabilize and attune properly, the bond can be severed. And if something goes wrong, she asked, if the wings don't stabilize, if the bond twists, what happens to us then? His jaw tightened again. Worst case, he said, we both suffer profound aether backlash, damage to our channels, emotional instability, lingering echoes. In other words, we both break, she summarized. I would not proceed without safeguards, he said. Oh, well, in that case, she said, a laugh bursting out of her that was closer to hysteria than humor. This sounds perfectly safe. He didn't flinch at her tone. He let it wash over him, then said, You asked. I am not going to lie to you. She believed that. Somehow, she knew if he offered her only soft words now, she would hate him for it later. So my choices are, she said slowly, live grounded for the rest of my life, staring up at the sky from balconies and pretending that's enough. Or gamble my very soul on an untested combination of artifice and ancient magic. Untested on this scale, he corrected, not entirely unknown. My comfort grows by the moment. His eyes softened just a fraction. Aeralyn Starfell, he said, and the way he said her name made her feel seen in a way she hadn't expected. If you decide no, I will not pressure you. You will have access to the best healers, the most advanced mobility runes. I will personally ensure you are not cast aside by the court. And if I decide yes, then we begin designing your wings, he said simply. You will fly again. Differently, yes, but you will fly. The possibility unfolded in her mind, wild and aching. The thought of wind in her hair again, of clouds brushing her skin, of not being the Fae everyone pitied, of her work meaning something more than the charred wreck of her last attempt. But attached to that image, always, was another, a thread linking her chest to his, feeling a prince's moods like weather, letting someone else feel every spike of fear, every flush of shame. Letting someone inside. I don't even know you, she said, aware of how small her voice sounded. Then get to know me, he said. Ask your questions, demand your conditions. A flicker of humor touched his mouth. Insult my designs if you must, but do not decide from fear alone. Either way. That last part pricked. She had jumped off enough ledges in her life, literal and otherwise, that being called afraid stung. Why, she asked abruptly, why are you offering this, truly? You could leave me to the healers and their kind condolences. You could build your constructs and ignore one broken Fae. Something flickered across his face. Regret, maybe, or memory. When you crashed through my ward, he said slowly, I felt your fear. It shook the entire array. You were in pain, yes, but more than that, you were terrified of falling, not of dying, of ending grounded. All that potential, all that stubbornness trapped. His gaze flicked to the bandages, then back to her eyes. I know what it is to be bound by something you did not choose. There it was again, that hint of loneliness, a cage she couldn't see. You think this will set you free too? She asked quietly. He considered that. Perhaps, he said, or perhaps I simply dislike waste. Waste, she repeated. Of talent, he clarified, of courage, of curiosity. You designed something astonishing and dangerous. I can help with the dangerous part. Together, we might turn it into something revolutionary. Despite everything, the pain, the fear, a small, irrational spark of pride warmed her at the word astonishing. The owl on his shoulder gave a soft, whirring hoot, as if seconding the sentiment. Aeralyn stared at the copper-strutted ceiling again, weighing the impossible against the intolerable. Grounded, forever, or tethered, temporarily, to a stranger with stormlight eyes and hands that built miracles. "Can I think about it?" she asked finally, "or is this one of those offers that vanish at moonrise?" "I would prefer not to delay too long," he said. "The longer we wait, the more your channels settle into their new patterns. That will make integration more difficult. But I won't demand an answer this moment." "How generous," she murmured. He inclined his head, accepting the barb. "Rest," he said. "Talk to your friend. Talk to the High Healer. I will have Geerling escort you on a tour of what I propose once you can stand." He turned toward the door. "You know," she said suddenly, "if this works, people will hate it." He glanced back. "People hate anything that makes them question their limits." "Lord Tavel will have an apoplexy," she added, unable to help herself. "That is almost enough reason by itself," Corin said, and this time the shadow of a smile reached his eyes. He left, the owl construct, Geerling, she supposed, rotating its head for a final look at her before following. The door closed with a soft click. Aeralyn let her head fall back against the cushions. The pain pulsed in time with her heartbeat. Beyond it, beyond the ache of loss, something else beat too. Not hope, not yet, but the echo of its shape. Liessa slipped back in a moment later, hovering at the edge of the table. "Well," she demanded, "what did the Prince of Impossible Contraptions want?" Aeralyn stared up at the copper arches. Then, slowly, she smiled. It hurt, but she did it anyway. "He wants," she said, "to give me new wings." Liessa blinked. "Oh, and," Aeralyn added, "he wants to tie our souls together to do it." Liessa stared at her for a long, stunned heartbeat. Then she said, very softly, "Of course he does." Aeralyn laughed. This time, it almost sounded like hers. "I haven't said yet," she whispered, more to herself than to Liessa. But as she closed her eyes, she saw not the ground, flat and unyielding, but the tower tops and the open sky beyond. She felt wind on skin she no longer had. Her fingers curled on the padding, as if grip alone could hold her to the future. Not yet, but soon. Aeralyn's second day in Corin Valor's workshop began with the unsettling realization that nothing in the artificer's domain stayed still. Pipes sighed, gears muttered. The walls themselves creaked with the idle breath of dormant mechanisms. Even the air shimmered faintly, as if permanently charged by ether. Aeralyn sat up with Liessa's help, wincing at the dull ache across her shoulders. Bandages still hugged her ribs, but the worst of the burning pain had eased into something survivable, if she didn't move too quickly, or breathe too deep, or think too hard about her missing wings. Geerling, the small owl-shaped construct, perched atop a metal beam overhead, its amber eyes tracking her movement with curious little whirs. Liessa adjusted a cushion behind Aeralyn. "You shouldn't push yourself. The healers said. "If I lie here any longer, I'll start rusting," Aeralyn muttered, "which would really complete the theme of the room, but I'm not ready for that aesthetic yet." Before Liessa could argue, a section of the far wall slid open with a soft mechanical sigh. Corin emerged from behind a partition, sleeves rolled up, hair slightly mussed, and oil smudged along the bridge of his nose. The prince of the Aether Court did not look princely at the moment. He looked like someone who hadn't slept. He also looked like someone trying very hard not to show concern. "You're upright," he observed. "I'm testing gravity's loyalty," Aeralyn said. "So far?" he asked, crossing the room with measured steps. "Moderately faithful." Corin's lips twitched. "Good. You'll need that loyalty when we begin today." "Begin?" Liessa echoed, eyes narrowing. "Begin what, exactly? Because if you say soul bond, I'm going to need something stronger than tea." "We're not bonding today," Corin said. "Today is calibration, explanation, and ensuring Aeralyn has informed consent before anything irreversible occurs." Aeralyn arched a brow. Was that phrase meant to reassure me? Because it didn't. "I don't specialize in reassurance," Corin said dryly. "I specialize in accuracy." "Yes," Aeralyn said, "your entire personality is very precise." "As opposed to yours," he said, "which appears to be powered entirely by impulse and stubbornness." Liessa made a choked sound. "Are you two flirting?" Aeralyn nearly fell off the table. "What? No." Corin blinked. "Was I?" Liessa pinched the bridge of her nose. "Spirits help us all." Corin led them to a raised platform at the center of the workshop, a broad circular dais surrounded by floating diagrams projected from crystal lenses. Runes spiraled across the floor, glowing faintly. And at the center, resting on a padded surface, were the beginnings of wings. They weren't complete, just the skeletal frames, graceful arcs of dark steel and star metal, jointed and segmented like the bones of a bird's wings. Aeralyn felt her breath catch, not from pain, but from something sharp and yearning. "They're beautiful," she whispered. "They're crude," Corin corrected. "But the foundation is correct." Aeralyn stepped closer, fingers trembling as she hovered them above the frame. Not touching, she didn't dare. The craftsmanship was extraordinary. Each segment bore delicate channels for aether flow. Filament sockets lined the ribs. The joint architecture mimicked natural fey wings almost exactly, but not quite. Corin had reinforced the stress points, added lattice filaments for lift modulation, and built in harmonic stabilizers. "You've already solved half the problems I kept running into," she murmured. "Not solved," Corin said. "Addressed." "Perfection is a myth created by unhappy engineers," Aeralyn muttered. "On that we agree." Liessa sighed. "Spirits above, there are two of you now." Aeralyn ignored her. "How will they attach?" Corin gestured to a separate console. "Through a harness. Star metal spine plate, distributed anchors to avoid pressure on the damaged tissue. It will sit beneath your shoulder blades and link into your aether channels here and here." He traced lines in the air with elegant fingers. Aeralyn's skin warmed, imagining those lines on her body. "And the wings will respond to me?" she asked. "Like natural ones?" "They will respond to the bond," he said. "Which means they'll respond to you too." "Yes." The air seemed to thicken between them. Liessa cleared her throat loudly. "Someone explain how this bond works before the tension turns flammable." Corin led them to another section of the workshop, where a crystal sphere floated between two copper rings. Runes glimmered along their edges, pulsing in slow, synchronized patterns. "This is a model of the bond," Corin said, tapping the outer ring. It flared gold. "Your aether signature." He tapped the inner ring. It flared silver blue. "Mine." "And the sphere?" Aeralyn asked. The construct, the wings. The sphere brightened, shifting softly between the two colors. A soul bond, he said, is not the permanent merging the stories exaggerate. It is a channel, created deliberately, with limits set during the ritual. Think of it as an emotional relay. It shares what needs sharing: intent, instinct, strong emotion when necessary, and aether flow. And when unnecessary? Aeralyn asked. It can be quieted. We will set strict barriers so neither of us is overwhelmed. Liessa crossed her arms. And what exactly counts as a strong emotion? Aeralyn shut her a glare. Liessa, I'm asking because he's a prince and you're emotionally constipated. Someone needs to get answers. Corin blinked slowly. Constipated? Aeralyn groaned. Ignore her. I will not, Corin said, sounding offended on Aeralyn's behalf. She is incorrect. You are not emotionally constipated. Aeralyn blinked. I'm not? No. You are simply untrained in communicating your emotional states, possibly due to chronic self-reliance. Oh, Aeralyn said faintly, that's not better. Liessa snorted. He's perceptive. Terrible at tone, but perceptive. Corin continued as if none of that had happened. We will train with minor bonding exercises first, synchronizing breath, aligning intent, testing emotional sensitivity. And if I get scared, Aeralyn asked quietly, if something destabilizes? I will feel it, Corin said, and I will anchor you. A shiver passed through her, terror and relief tangled together. When the healers deemed Aeralyn strong enough, Corin moved to the first calibration test, a pseudo-bond pulse. She sat on the dais, back straight, hands resting on her knees. Gearling fluttered down to perch on the edge of the platform, head swiveling. Corin stood a few feet away, palms open. This is not the bond, he said, just an echo, a taste of what shared intent feels like. Aeralyn swallowed. All right. Close your eyes. She did. Breathe. She did that too, shallow at first, then deeper as the pain faded beneath focus. Aether stirred, soft, faint, like the brush of wind through closed curtains. Good, Corin said. Now listen. She didn't know what she was listening for. Then something touched her. Not physically, inside. A gentle brush, a whisper of someone else's presence at the edge of her mind. Cool, calm, disciplined, like a quiet storm contained in crystal. Corin. She gasped. You feel it, he said, not a question. Yes, she whispered. It is only the echo, he murmured. Nothing binding, just resonance. The resonance deepened, not invasive, not forceful, but steady, grounding. She felt her heartbeat align, just slightly, with a rhythm that wasn't hers. Calm, he projected, steady. Her breathing eased, her shoulders loosened. Then something inside her, something raw and injured, rebelled. The echo trembled. Aeralyn's heartbeat spiked. Fear, shame, grief. The surge rose too fast to stop. The aether pulse wavered. Corin's presence steadied, the emotional equivalent of a firm hand closing over hers. Breathe. The command wasn't spoken aloud. It was felt, cool and sure, a counterweight to the rising panic. Aeralyn drew a shaky breath. Another. The resonance stabilized. That's enough, Corin said softly. The echo faded, leaving her feeling momentarily hollow. Aeralyn opened her eyes. Her hands shook. Gearling clicked sympathetically. Corin looked at her with no judgment, only analysis and a strange, quiet gentleness. You see now, he said, why the bond cannot be taken lightly. She nodded, throat tight. And why it cannot be done without your trust. She looked at him for a long moment. Trust. Such a small word with such enormous risk. I'm not used to needing people, she admitted, voice small. I know, Corin said, but you don't have to need me. Only trust that together we can keep you safe. Liessa sniffed. That was almost comforting. Almost? Aeralyn echoed. It lacked warmth. Lyessa said. "He needs practice." Corin looked deeply offended. "I am perfectly warm." "No," Lyessa corrected. "You're handsome, brilliant, and deeply repressed." Aeralyn made a strangled sound. Corin glared at Lyessa. "I am not repressed." Lyessa raised a brow. "What do you call everything about your entire existence, then?" Corin sputtered softly, which seemed to break Aeralyn's tension entirely. She laughed, really laughed. The sound echoed break in the metal chamber. Corin's expression softened as he watched her. When she was well enough to stand for short periods, Corin brought out the first prototype harness. The star metal spine plate gleamed under workshop lights, runes glimmering faintly. Aeralyn's fingers tingled just looking at it. "This will be uncomfortable," Corin warned. "Everything involving my back is uncomfortable at the moment." Lyessa braced her shoulders as Corin carefully aligned the harness. Aeralyn sucked in a breath. The metal was cool at first, then warm, then hot. Aether surged through the plate, searching for channels that no longer existed. Pain flashed, not sharp, but deep, like her body remembering something that wasn't there anymore. Aeralyn clenched her jaw. Corin's hand hovered near her shoulder. "If it's too much—" "No," she said through her teeth. "Keep going." He adjusted the stabilizing runes. The heat eased. The harness settled. It felt heavy, wrong, like a ghost limb's cruel replacement. But beneath that, faint, almost inaudible, was potential. A whisper of movement, a suggestion of wings. She exhaled shakily. "Is this what they'll feel like?" "No," Corin said. "This is what the absence feels like. Once the wings attach, the balance will change." She nodded, absorbing that. Lyessa squeezed her hand. "You don't have to do this alone," she murmured. Aeralyn didn't look at Corin when she said, "I know," but she felt him look at her. The next few days blurred into a rhythm. Rest, healing salves, harness calibration, pseudobond exercises, and long hours of Corin sketching runic diagrams while Aeralyn argued with him about lift ratios and torque allowances. But word traveled. Even deep in the artificer's wing, she heard the whispers. Aeralyn's starfell destroyed her wings. She's broken. Prince Corin is building abominations again. A mechanical winged fae? Unthinkable. Tradition forbids it. Lord Tavel will never allow it. One afternoon, the echoes of those whispers gnawed particularly deep. Aeralyn stared at the half-assembled wings and felt the weight of judgment pressing on her chest. Corin noticed. "You're quiet," he said. "Just tired." "That is not accurate," she glared. "You can't diagnose my thoughts." "Not yet," he corrected. "But your expression is as readable as a poorly worded manual." "What part of this seems readable to you?" "That you are thinking of other people's opinions." She bristled. "Maybe I care what people think." "Do you?" he asked gently. Aeralyn's throat tightened. Corin stepped closer, not too close, but enough that his presence steadied her. "Innovation always draws the ire of the fearful," he said. "Your wings are not an abomination. They are possibility. And if they fail, then the failure is mine, not yours." Her breath hitched. "That's not fair." "Perhaps not," he said. "But it is true." His certainty settled around her like a protective veil. For the first time since the accident, she believed, truly believed, that she might fly again. That night, during the final echo exercise of the day, something unexpected happened. Aeralyn sat cross-legged, eyes closed. Corin mirrored her posture across the dais. "Open your presence," he said, softly. "Let the aether resonate." She breathed, reaching for the calm she'd achieved earlier. The echo arrived, soft, steady. Then something else brushed her. A feeling. Not hers. A deep, lonely ache wrapped in layers of discipline. A quiet yearning buried too long. A weight of responsibility carried without complaint, but not without cost. Corin. She gasped, eyes flying open. Corin's eyes opened too. He had felt her feel him. Silence stretched, charged and intimate. Aeralyn swallowed hard. Was that supposed to happen? No, Corin said quietly, but it means the bond will take, strongly. Is that good? His gaze held hers. It means we will fly. Her breath caught. Not she. We. That night, as Liessa slept nearby and the workshop dimmed to a lazy hum, Aeralyn lay awake staring at the copper-ribbed ceiling. Her back pulsed with pain. Her chest pulsed with something else. Fear, hope, and the fragile beginnings of trust in a man she barely knew, but already far too clearly. Tomorrow, they would begin full bond preparations. Tomorrow, she would choose whether to tie her soul, temporarily, to Prince Corin Halor. And as she finally drifted toward sleep, one thought hovered with her. This time, when I fall, someone will catch me. The soul bond began on a day that should have belonged to Stormlight. Instead, the sky over Liran Spire was a flat, windless blue. No dramatic clouds, no portentous thunder.
So, salmon does have iron in it, but it's not a lot. There's better sources of iron. Aeralyn sat on the central dais of Corin's workshop, bare feet on cool metal, spine pressed against the star metal harness. The half-finished wings arcs rested in their sockets, frames only, no filaments yet, but heavy enough to bow her shoulders with unfamiliar weight. "You're sure you want to do this?" Liessa asked for the 7th time. "No," Aeralyn said. "Yes, maybe. Ask me again once it's over." Liessa huffed. "If this goes badly, I'm telling your mother it was entirely your idea." "Good," Aeralyn muttered. "She'll believe you." Gearling circled above, wings ticking softly, then settled on a beam to watch like some tiny mechanical judge. Corin stood within the ring of runes etched into the floor, sleeves rolled up, storm-colored eyes steady. The runes glowed gently beneath his boots, responding to his presence. "The bond will have 3 anchors," he reminded her. "You, me, and the wings. We go slowly. If at any point you want to stop, you say so." "And if I'm too overwhelmed to speak?" Aeralyn asked. "Then think stop as loudly as you can," he said. "I'll feel it." His calm should have comforted her. It only made her more aware of how much she was about to hand him. "And you?" she asked abruptly. He blinked. "What about me? What if you want to stop?" His gaze didn't waver. "I do not begin things I intend to abandon midway." Liessa muttered under her breath. "And there's the repressed honor complex. Knew it." Corin gave her a look that promised precisely 0 remorse. Aeralyn took a breath. The harness pressed into her shoulder blades. Pain flared, then settled. "All right," she said. "Let's tie our foolish souls together." The ritual circle warmed as Corin activated the outer ring. Runes flared gold along the metal inlays around Aeralyn, matching the faint glow beneath her bare feet. "Close your eyes," he said. She did. "Breathe." She obeyed. In, out, in again. The air tasted faintly of metal and something ozone sharp. "Focus on your center," Corin murmured, "where you feel your aether most strongly." Aeralyn felt it, like a tiny sun behind her ribs, dimmed by injury but still there, stubborn and hot. "Good," he said. "I'm going to open my signature now. You will feel it. Do not fight the connection. Let it pass through you." He didn't need to tell her when it happened. Corin's presence slid against hers like a cool current meeting a hot one. The echo from their earlier exercises had been a brush. This was immersion. Aeralyn gasped, knuckles whitening on the edge of the dais. She felt him, not his thoughts or secrets, but his shape, calm and disciplined, with coiled intensity beneath, like a storm held behind glass. His awareness touched hers and hesitated there, non-invasive but impossible to ignore. "Easy," he said, voice both in her ears and not. "You're doing well. Feels like you're rearranging my insides," she muttered. That would be a more complicated ritual. The outer ring of runes shifted hue, threads of silver blue winding through the gold. "Now," Corin said softly, "I'll link the wings." For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the construct woke.
The skeletal frames at her back shivered, not physically, yet, but in a way she felt, like new muscles flexing for the first time. Aether surged through the channels in the harness, along the frames, back toward her center. The world narrowed to 3 points: her, Corin, and the wings. A third presence bloomed between them, raw, unfinished, hungry for direction. Aeralyn's breath hitched. "Is that?" "The construct," Corin confirmed, voice quiet, thread of awe beneath his control. "Say hello." "How?" she demanded. "Intend," he said simply. "You are good at that." She swallowed. "Hello," she thought, feeling ridiculous. The new presence responded with a flicker of anticipation. It had no personality, no history, but it recognized her attention like a plant towards sunlight. Warmth radiated down the frame arcs, blooming across her back like heat through metal. Lines of sensation traced where her wings would be. It hurt. It also made her want to cry. "It's listening to you," Corin said. "Good. Now I need you to listen to me." His presence swelled, not bigger exactly, but more defined. The circle tightened. Aeralyn felt his focus, a razor of intent, as he guided Aether through the triad, from his center, into the construct, into her, back again. The energy cycle formed, fragile and bright. "Breathe," he repeated. "Let it settle." She tried. For a few aching seconds, it worked. The tide of aether smoothed, the bond anchored. She felt stable, like a bridge between 2 cliffs. Then, something inside her remembered falling. Fear spiked, sharp, hot, involuntary. The new construct flared in response, amplifying the surge. Aether bucked. The world reeled. Heat scorched across her back as the runes on the harness flared too bright. "Aeralyn," Corin said sharply, both voice and presence tightening, "you need to level. You're overloading the relay." I can't." Her chest clenched. The memory of tearing wings, of fire, slammed through her. The bond carried the echo straight into the construct. The wings spasmed. Actual movement this time, frames twitching, scraping metal against metal. The stabilizing runes screamed in protest. Pain lanced down her spine. "Stop," Corin commanded, not to her, but to the construct. His will slammed through the bond, cool and forceful, clamping down on the surging aether. Her fear collided with his control. For a heartbeat, they struggled. Then his calm wrapped around her panic, absorbing the worst of it, like a larger vessel containing a boiling one. The energy spike dropped. Lights dimmed. Aeralyn collapsed forward, forehead nearly touching her knees, breath coming in harsh pulls. Corin stepped into the circle, ignoring the residual glow, and caught her shoulders. His hands were warm, steady. The contact grounded her more than the runes. "It's all right," he said, low. "You're all right." "You felt that?" she rasped. Stupid question. Of course he had. "Yes." "All of it?" "Yes." There was no judgment in his voice. That made it worse. "I almost ruined it," she said, squeezing her eyes shut. "You almost overloaded the construct," he corrected. "That is what tests are for, to learn your limits before you're in the sky." "I felt you take it," she whispered. "The fear, like you pulled it." "I redirected the surge so it would not cook your channels," he said clinically, but his thumbs pressed just a fraction harder against her shoulders. "I did not take it." "Well, it's gone now," she muttered, shaky. "Or at least it's not trying to rip my spine apart." "That's because I am very good at my work." She let out a helpless, breathless laugh. Lyessa exhaled loudly from the sidelines, where she'd hovered just outside the circle, hands fisted at her sides. "If either of you ever want to have a normal, low-risk hobby, I know a place that sells gardening kits." Aeralyn lifted her head, sweaty and pale but upright. "I'll plant flowers once I can land without exploding, thanks." Corin's hands lingered on her shoulders a heartbeat longer than necessary before he stepped back. "The bond took," he said. "We have our triad. Now we refine it." They refined it for days. Simple things at first. Corin would stand across from her, wings inactive but harness engaged, and ask her to shift her focus from herself to him and back again. "Your center," he'd say. "Your breath, your aether. Now the construct. Feel its arc, its channels. Good. Now me. Where am I?" She'd swallow, zero in on that cool, storm-lit presence. It was never exactly inside her, more like a nearby star she could sense even with her eyes closed. "Left," she'd mutter. "No, forward. Stop moving." "I am not moving," he'd reply calmly. "Then your aura is fidgeting." "My aura does not fidget." "Tell that to my spine." Lyessa watched every session with the tense frustration of someone whose best friend had decided to juggle knives. "You're both insane," she muttered more than once. "But at least you're coordinated about it." The bond's side effects emerged gradually. The first time, Aeralyn was alone in her curtained corner of the workshop, trying to sleep. Her back throbbed in time with her pulse. She tossed and turned, hissing when the harness edges caught tender skin. A spike of irritation flared, not hers. She froze. "Corin?" Annoyance simmered against the edge of her awareness. But it wasn't directed at her. It was tangled with exhaustion and the metallic tang of overworked channels. Aeralyn focused tentatively. "What are you doing?" There was a beat of startled stillness. Then his reply, not in words, but in feeling. Resignation, determination, a faint clatter of metal. He was still working. Late, of course. She imagined him bent over a rune-etched plate, hands steady even as his muscles ached. She shouldn't know that. She did anyway. Something inside her tugged. Guilt? Affection? She wasn't sure. She shifted carefully, adjusting her position to ease the ache. Sleep, she projected, unsure if the thought would carry. Amusement brushed her mind, soft as a breath, and under it a hint of gratitude. The bond quieted. She fell asleep faster than she expected. Not all side effects were so gentle. 2 days later, during a calibration session, Corin flinched, barely, but enough that she noticed. "What?" Aeralyn demanded. "Nothing," he said. "Continue." She squinted at him. "You're lying. I am prioritizing the exercise. You're in pain. It's irrelevant." "It's relevant to me," she snapped. "You're standing in my soul, remember? I can feel you grit your teeth from across the room." His jaw actually unclenched. "It is a minor backlash. I misjudged a containment earlier." "A backlash from what?" "Lord Taval," Corin said, the name flat and distasteful. "He visited." Lyessa, arranging vials by the counter, stiffened. "That snake was here?" Corin's expression didn't change. "He requested an inspection of the artificer's wing to ensure no dangerous experiments were being conducted without the council's oversight." "By dangerous experiments, he means you. By dangerous experiments, he means anything that might disrupt his idea of an orderly world," Corin corrected. "But yes, he means me." "And me," Aeralyn muttered. "He does not deem you important enough to target directly. Yet. That's comforting." Corin's eyes met hers, more serious now. "His interference caused a surge in one of the stabilizing arrays. I contained it. There was residual backlash. It is not your concern. Everything that touches this project is my concern. They're my wings, my life, my—" She stopped short of saying soul, and glared instead. "If Taval is pushing, I need to know where." Lyessa chimed in, crossing her arms. "She's right. You don't get to shoulder everything alone just because you have a savior complex. I do not have a— Your Highness, Lyessa said sweetly, I am a healer.
My job is literally diagnoses. Don't fight me on this. Corin looked skyward as if appealing to the runes for patience. Aeralyn bit back a smile despite the tension. What did he say? Corin's gaze lowered, sharp again. That he's heard talk of mechanical wings, of soul bonds, that such practices blur the line between fae and construct, that the Council may wish to review any such endeavors before they spread. Aeralyn's hands curled at her sides. I'm not a disease. No, Corin said. You are a threat. She blinked. That's worse. A threat to his order, he clarified, to his claim that what has always been must always be. Innovation terrifies men like him. They fear invisible cracks beneath their feet. He'll do more than talk, Lyessa said darkly. He'll meddle. Corin's eyes cooled. He already tried. I reinforced the warding on the primary arrays. Aeralyn's gaze flicked to the wings on the platform. They gleamed under the lamps, innocent and waiting. Can he stop us? She asked quietly. Legally? Corin paused. Not yet. You consented. The High Healer approved. By the laws of the Aether Court, your body is your own to endanger as you see fit. That phrase was strangely empowering. But Taval thrives on shifting opinions. If he can turn enough of the Council against the idea, they can restrict my artificing privileges, or redirect resources, or drag you before them and demand explanations. Let them, Aeralyn said before she could stop herself. Let them look me in the eye and tell me I should stay broken to keep them comfortable. Lyessa gave a fierce little nod. That's the Aeralyn I know. Corin watched her, something like pride flickering in his gaze. We'll take precautions, he said. The bond rituals remain private. The wing tests will be conducted beyond the standard patrol routes. Aeralyn lifted her chin. Let him talk, she said. We'll fly first. Lord Taval did not wait long to strike closer. 3 nights later, Corin woke to his workshop, screaming. Not audibly, not exactly. The emergency wards flared in his mind like shards of white-hot glass. He jolted upright at his work table, sending a cascade of tools clattering. Aether burned along the lines etched into the floor, dragging him to full, razor-edged awareness. Something had breached the lower stabilizing chamber. He grabbed the nearest focus rod and sprinted down the spiral stairs, shadows flickering around him as the workshop's dormant constructs stirred defensively. The chamber door glowed angry red around the edges, runes strained. Corin slammed his palm against the central sigil. Override, he snapped. Valor, prime. The door hissed open. Inside, the primary stabilizing array, a complex lattice of crystals, runes, and pipes, pulsed out of rhythm. Aether currents snarled, twisting around a hairline crack spidering through the central crystal. Someone had tampered with it, not clumsily, deliberately. Corin's jaw set. Taval, he said under his breath, and moved. The next minutes blurred into precise, brutal triage. He shunted energy away from the crack, rerouted flow through secondary channels, damped resonances that could have cascaded into a full workshop detonation. He contained it. Barely. When the last surge fizzled and the array fell back into sullen, steady humming, Corin sagged against the nearest pillar, sweat cooling on his brow. His channels burned, his head pounded. A thin trickle of blood ran from his nose. He wiped it away, expression hardening. They were not safe. Not here, not even in his own domain. And if the stabilizing array had blown during a calibration with Aeralyn linked to it, his stomach turned. We're accelerating the timetable, he told the array, voice low. No more half measures. The array hummed on, oblivious. The next morning, Aeralyn felt the aftermath before she saw it. She woke to a pounding in her temples and a dull ache in her chest that didn't belong to her.
For a confused moment, she thought she'd slept wrong. Then she remembered the bond. "Corin?" she whispered into the stillness. Pain answered, not sharp, but deep, like exhausted muscles and overused channels. It washed across her awareness in a wave. She shoved aside her blankets and swung her legs over the edge of the cot. "Absolutely not," she muttered. "You don't get to martyr yourself in silence." Lyessa, dozing in a nearby chair with a book face down on her lap, snorted awake. "What? Did something explode?" "Not yet," Aeralyn said grimly, "but he's flirting with the idea." They found Corin leaning over the main console, one hand braced on the edge, the other massaging his temple. The runes around him glowed faintly, cycling through diagnostic sequences. His hair was tousled, eyes shadowed. Aeralyn's concern sharpened. What happened? Corin's gaze flicked to her, then away. "Nothing that needs to worry you." Her temper flared. "You do remember I'm tied to you, yes? I woke up with your headache." He hesitated. Lyessa folded her arms. "Tell her," Lyessa said, "or I will, and I'll make you sound worse." Corin exhaled. Someone tampered with the primary stabilizing array. Aeralyn's stomach dropped. "When?" "Last night," he said. "I caught it before it cascaded. The damage was contained." "And what if you hadn't?" she demanded. "What if it had blown while I was linked, or while the wings were active?" "It didn't. I won't let it." "That's not an answer." His jaw tightened. "You think I don't understand the risk?" "I think you understand it too well," she snapped.
"And you still didn't tell me," his eyes flashed, "because I knew exactly how you'd react." "How? Rationally?" She laughed bitter. "You bound my soul to yours, Corin. You don't get to decide which catastrophes I'm informed about." The room hummed with tension. Lyessa watched, lips pressed thin, clearly torn between smacking them both and stepping back. Corin's voice cooled. "If you'd known last night, what would you have done?" "I would have," she broke off, "run into the stabilizing chamber and probably died getting in his way," some part of her supplied. "Nothing of use, only more danger." He saw the realization cross her face. "Exactly," he said quietly. "My job is to keep you alive, Aeralyn, not invite you into every risk I take to do it." "I'm not a fragile crystal," she said, stung. "I can handle danger." "I know you can," he said, "too well. You run toward it. I'm trying to ensure you don't do that right into an aether explosion." "Maybe I get to decide what I run into," she shot back. "Not while your life is literally attached to mine." That landed like a slap. Silence fell. Lyessa cleared her throat gingerly. "I'm going to go check the herb cabinets for explosive resistance plants. You two, sort this out." She fled. Aeralyn glared at Corin. "You think this bond means you control me?" "I think this bond means we share consequences," he said evenly, "which changes the variables." "Maybe I made a mistake," she blurted. "Maybe I shouldn't have agreed to this at all." She didn't mean it, not entirely, but hurt and fear had sharp tongues. Corin's expression didn't flinch. That somehow hurt more. "Perhaps you did," he said softly. The words hit harder than any aether surge. Aeralyn stared at him, throat tight. "Is that what you think? That I'm some foolish project you led into your workshop and now regret?" He inhaled. "No," he said. "You are not a project. You're—" He stopped himself, shutters slamming down behind his eyes so fast the bond stung. "You're what?" she demanded. The connection between them crackled with swallowed emotion. "Complicated," he said finally. She laughed once, bitter and small. "That's the most Prince thing you've ever said." He looked away. "We should suspend flight attempts until the arrays are fully secured." The practicalness of it made sense. The timing felt like abandonment. Aeralyn's chest burned. "So that's it? We're paused? Because you're scared Lord Taval might damage your precious machines?" He flinched, very slightly. "Because I'm not willing to risk your life for the sake of my pride,"
he said, "or for your impatience." "And what about my choice?" she whispered. His jaw clenched. "You made it when you stepped into the circle. Now we both live with it." The bond between them went brittle and thin, like glass stretched too far. Aeralyn spun on her heel and walked away before she said something neither of them could take back. The incomplete wings on her back pulled awkwardly with the motion, reminding her of their unfinished state. She wanted to tear them off. She wanted to fly. She didn't know what she wanted, except that every option hurt. Word of the incident spread faster than aether fire. By midday, the High Healer had visited. By evening, so had Lord Taval. He arrived with 2 council aides in tow, all sharp silks and sharper smiles. The workshop's wards flared as he stepped through the main door, resisting his presence like an unwelcome draft. "Prince Corin," Taval said, voice oiled with false courtesy, "we hear there was disturbance last night." Corin stood beside his console, face carved from cool stone. "The stabilizing array encountered an irregularity. It has been corrected." "An irregularity," Taval repeated. His gaze slid over Corin's shoulder and caught. Aeralyn stood on the upper catwalk, one hand wrapped around the railing for balance. She'd come to watch, quiet, half-hidden, heart pounding. Taval's eyes narrowed briefly at the sight of the unfinished wings at her back. "Ah," he said, "so the rumors were true." "Rumors," Corin said calmly, "are rarely a reliable source of technical details." Taval smiled thinly. "I've long admired your talent for deflection, Your Highness. Some might even call it an art." "Those people have too much time and not enough work," Corin said. A council aide coughed into his sleeve, hiding a smirk that vanished when Taval turned his head. "We have concerns," Taval went on. "The council has granted you generous latitude in your artificing endeavors. But when those endeavors risk destabilizing the aether infrastructure of Lyran Spire, there was no risk to the city. The warding held, as designed. And yet it was taxed," Taval said smoothly, "and all for the sake of one phase vanity." Heat flared under Aeralyn's skin. Vanity. She descended the iron steps before she could talk herself out of it. The metal rang under her bare feet. Corin's head snapped toward her. His expression flickered, warning, worry, and something like admiration, all tangled. Aeralyn ignored him. "Lord Taval," she said, stopping at the base of the stairs. Her new wings tugged at her shoulders, heavy as accusations. Taval's eyebrows rose. "Miss Starfell, I had not realized you were present." "And mechanical," she added sweetly, lifting a shoulder as if to display the harness. "You can tack that onto your list of horrors." His gaze raked over her back, lingering with visible distaste on the incomplete construct. "I see the prince has indeed taken leave of tradition." "Tradition," she said, "took leave of me when my wings burned." A flicker of genuine discomfort crossed his face before smoothing away. "Accidents are tragic, but they are also natural. To compound them with further abominations—" "Abomination," she repeated, voice flattening. "Because I refuse to accept a half-life? Because I dared ask more of myself than pity? Because you risk the stability of the Aether Court for your personal comfort," Taval said. "Your project has already proven dangerous. What will happen when you take it into the sky? When your prince's pet contraption tears open the currents above our home?" She bristled, but Corin spoke before she did, voice low and cold. "Aeralyn Starfell is not my pet." "No?" Taval asked mildly. "Then what is she? Your experiment? Your test case?
It is difficult to keep track, Your Highness. You collect lost causes with such devotion. Aeralyn's stomach twisted. Corin's knuckles whitened against the console. You will not speak of her. She's right here, Aeralyn cut in, pulse hammering, and she can speak for herself. Tavel gave her a smile like a knife. By all means, Miss Starfell, enlighten us. Why should the Council sanction this mechanical indulgence? 1,000 reasons slammed into each other in her head. Freedom, innovation, the right to choose her own body's future. But the weight of Tavel's gaze, the looming presence of the Council aides, the memory of nearly overloading the bond, it all tangled her tongue. Because, she began, then faltered, because I can't live on the ground. Because I will not be less fey just to soothe your fear. The words burned in her chest. They refused to come out smoothly. Tavel's eyes gleamed. Because you miss the view, he suggested. Because it is difficult to accept limits. Her cheeks flamed. Because it's my choice, she snapped finally. My back, my risk. And his, Tavel said, nodding toward Corin. And the city's. You forget, Miss Starfell, that we do not drift alone in the aether. Every ripple touches someone. Then perhaps your energy would be better spent stopping whoever sabotaged the array, she shot back, instead of coming here to wag fingers at the people fixing it. Tavel's smile thinned. Sabotage is a heavy word. The crystal didn't crack itself, Corin said, unless you're arguing my equations failed, in which case you should sit down before you embarrass yourself. One of the aides choked. Tavel shot him a withering look. The Council will review your work, Tavel said, turning back to Corin. In the meantime, I strongly suggest you suspend any further bonding rituals, or risk your entire Artificer's Charter. On what grounds? Corin asked, voice deceptively mild. On the grounds that your experiments threaten public safety, Tavel said. I doubt the citizens of Lyrenspire would appreciate their prince treating the aether infrastructure like a personal playground. Corin's aura spiked, a surge of tightly leashed anger that Aeralyn felt through the bond like a distant thunderclap. He smothered it almost instantly. We are done here. If the Council wishes to convene a formal review, they may send written notice. In the meantime, this is my domain. Leave. Tavel held his gaze for a long, charged moment. Then he inclined his head with mock graciousness. As you wish, Your Highness. But storms have a way of ignoring borders. He departed with his aides, the workshop wards flaring in relief as the door shut behind him. Silence slammed down. Aeralyn exhaled shakily. Well, she said, that went badly, Corin finished. Worse than I hoped, but better than I feared, she said. He didn't try to rip the wings off, so that's a plus. That can be arranged, came Lyes's voice from the upper walkway, where she'd apparently watched the entire exchange while pretending to sort glassware, preferably with his head still attached. Corin turned to Aeralyn. His face was calm. His aura screamed pressure. We need to halt public-facing tests. She flinched. You mean stop? Pause, he corrected, until the review is scheduled. Until I can prove the arrays are secure and that this project poses no threat to the Spire. And what about the threat to me? She asked quietly. Of staying grounded longer? His jaw tightened. You have already survived weeks without wings. You can survive a few more. That's easy for you to say, she whispered. You can still fly. The moment the words left her mouth, she regretted them. Corin's expression shuddered. She felt the echo of hurt through the bond, sharp and quickly buried. You think my wings make this easier? He said. They do not. They only make it more obvious when I fail to use them where needed. What does that even mean? She demanded. It means, he said, voice suddenly cold as high-altitude air, that for all your pain, you are not the only one bound by expectations you did not ask for.
The bond throbbed with suppressed emotion. She reached for it instinctively and hit a wall. He'd pulled back. Not severed, not even fully closed, but shielded. His presence felt farther away than it had since the day of the bonding. Aeralyn's chest ached. "You're shutting me out," she said. "I am regulating," he replied.
"Before my anger spills over and destabilizes you, maybe I can handle your anger. I am not willing to test that." The distance between them stretched, a hollow space humming under her skin. "I'll be in my quarters," she said, voice brittle, practicing being grounded. She walked away, the incomplete wings at her back heavier than ever. The fracture lingered. In the days that followed, Corin did what he said he would. He threw himself into securing the arrays, reinforcing warding, documenting every safeguard to present to the council. He also kept their bond as quiet as possible. The practical parts remained: calibrations, scheduled exercises, emergency pulses if one of them spiked too hard. The other parts, the shared flickers of amusement, the unintentionally traded moods, the late-night sense of not being alone, faded. He didn't cut her off, he just muted. Aeralyn hated how much she missed the noise. Lyessa watched her reshape tools and reconfigure filament sockets with more force than strictly necessary. "You're angry," Lyessa observed one afternoon as Aeralyn stabbed a screwdriver into a stubborn rune plate. "I'm productive," Aeralyn said. "You're productive like a storm is damp," Lyessa countered. "It's a side effect, not the point." Aeralyn huffed. "If you're here to tell me to talk about my feelings, I swear by every bent gear in this place." "I'm here," Lyessa said, "to remind you that you're allowed to be hurt when people pull away. That bond thing, that's not just runes and ether, it's you, open, vulnerable." And he slammed doors. Aeralyn's grip tightened on the screwdriver. "He's trying to protect me," Lyessa snorted. "He's trying to protect himself from what he feels. And maybe, sure, but he's allowed to be scared, you know. I never said he wasn't. Then why are you punishing yourself for his fear?" The question landed like a dropped wrench. "I'm not," Aeralyn began, then stopped. "Am I?" Lyessa raised both brows. "You started working 16 hours a day, skipped 3 meals, and tried to design a new lift distribution schema just so you wouldn't think about him not looking at you. Draw your own conclusions." Aeralyn sagged back against the workbench, harness pressing into sore muscles. "I hate this," she muttered. "I hate needing someone else in my head. I hate that when he closes off, it feels like I'm alone in a room that used to be full." Lyessa's expression softened. "You're not alone." "Feels like it." "Then tell him," Lyessa said. "Use your words, not your martyrdom." "I can't just walk up to him and say, 'Hi, I miss our shared emotional turbulence. We're—'" She flailed for a word. "Friends? Partners? Something else?" Lyessa saved her. "You're bound," she said simply. "That's already more intimate than half the court's supposed romances." Aeralyn pressed her palms over her face. "This was so much simpler when my biggest problem was not exploding crystals." Lyessa patted her shoulder. "Oh, Era, it was never simple. You just had more confidence when the danger was falling. This?" She gestured vaguely between Aeralyn's chest and the general direction of Corin's workshop. "This is where you've always been a coward." "Rude," Aeralyn said weakly. "Accurate," Lyessa replied. "Now, are you going to talk to him, or am I going to have to engineer an emotional accident?" "An emotional accident?" Aeralyn repeated, wary. "I could accidentally lock you in a room together with limited air, or bribe Gearling to deliver fake emergency messages to both of you, or—" all right, I'll talk to him. Spare the owl." Gearling hooted from a nearby beam, as if in agreement. She found Corin late that evening in the High Observatory, one of the few places above the workshop where the warding allowed open sky. The observatory balcony jutted from the side of Lyron's spire like a glass petal. Aether lamps glowed softly inside, casting warm light on bookshelves, charts, and a large brass contraption pointing at the stars. Corin stood at the railing, back to the room, wings folded. Unlike her, he still had his natural ones, an elegant sweep of pale feathers tinged with faint silver. Aeralyn hesitated at the threshold, then stepped out, the night air cool against her cheeks. "You're brooding," she said. "Observing," he corrected without turning. "Brooding implies excessive feeling." She joined him at the railing. The city spread below, bridges lit like strings of stars, fae gliding between tiers. The sight twisted and soothed her all at once. "Lyessa says I'm emotionally constipated," she said. Her words, not mine, though I did not disagree. "I noticed," Aeralyn said dryly. "She also says you're emotionally repressed." "She is less wrong there," he admitted. She blinked. "That's more self-awareness than I expected." "Do not grow used to it," he said. "It is exhausting." Silence stretched between them, more companionable than the strained quiet of the last few days. "I can't feel you as much," she said, finally, voice soft. "Through the bond." He exhaled slowly. "That was the intent." "It hurts," she said, "and I don't understand why you think that's better." His hands tightened on the railing. "Because when Tavel interfered with the array, I almost lost control. If you'd been fully open, you would have felt it. All of it. My anger, my fear, the ugly parts. I can handle ugly," she said. "I am not certain I can," he replied quietly. "Not when it risks hurting you." "You keep deciding what I can handle," she said. "What if I get a say?" He finally turned his head to look at her. The starlight traced sharp planes across his face, softened at the eyes. "Then say it," he murmured. She swallowed. "I feel alone when you pull back," she admitted. "And then I feel stupid for feeling alone, because you're right there and I can see you and talk to you, but it's different. The bond spoiled me. Now the distance feels like falling, slowly, with no wind." His expression shifted, something like regret cracking through the stone. "Aeralyn," he said, her name carrying a weight that echoed down the link. "I never meant to make you feel that." "Intent doesn't erase impact," she said, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. "If this is going to work, we can't keep using fear as an excuse to retreat. That goes for both of us." A faint huff escaped him, almost a laugh. "You are telling a prince of the Aether Court that he is handling his trauma poorly?" "Yes," she said, "and you're welcome." He looked out over the city again. "Do you know what they called me?" he said after a moment, "when I took over the artificer's wing?" "Brooding recluse," she guessed. "The Prince of Broken Things," he said, "because I spent more time in the lower tiers restoring damaged arrays and malfunctioning constructs than I did at court functions. They blamed me for every failure, every crack in the infrastructure, even when I was the one fixing them." "That's unfair," she said, anger pricking on his behalf before she could tamp it down. "Yes," he said, "it is also irrelevant. The title stuck. I embraced it. Better a prince of broken things than a king of empty ones." She studied him. "So you collect broken things," she said slowly. "Arrays, constructs, fae who tried to re-engineer the sky, and you fix them. Even if it breaks you a little." He gave her a wry look. "I said you are not a project. Do not reduce yourself to one." "I'm not," she said. "I'm the exception." Confusion flickered. "Exception?" "The one who fixes you back." Something like hope flared in the bond, bright and frightened. "You're already in my head," she went on. "You may as well let me in on purpose. All of you, anger included. Otherwise, this bond is just you standing guard over both our hearts and never letting either of us use them." He stared at her for a long, silent moment. Then, slowly, he lowered his shields. It wasn't dramatic. There was no rush of visions, no sudden flood, just more. More presence, more texture, a richer backdrop of emotions he usually kept smoothed flat. Worry,
determination, flickers of wry amusement, a gulf of loneliness that made her chest ache. "There," he said softly. "This is more honest." She exhaled, realizing she'd been holding her breath. "Better," she said. "Messier, but better." "You may regret that when I am irritated and you cannot sleep," he warned. "I already can't sleep," she said. "At least this way I'll know why." They stood like that for a while, side by side, bond humming with new, fragile openness. Below, the city lights flickered. Above, the stars watched. Between, two fae teetered on the edge of something neither had planned for. Later that night, as Aeralyn drifted toward sleep in her cot beneath the copper arches, a thought brushed her through the bond. Hesitant, uncharacteristically uncertain. "I do not regret the bond." It was Corin. He could have said it aloud. He chose the link instead. Warmth blossomed behind her ribs. "Neither do I," she thought back, the words glowing as they crossed. The bond thrummed, settled. Outside, unseen by either of them, a faint crack spidered through a secondary crystal in a little-used corner of the workshop. Sabotage seldom rested. But for the moment, in the quiet between storms, Aeralyn and Corin did. They would need the strength. The next time the arrays failed, it would not be in an empty chamber. It would be in the open sky. And both their hearts would be on the line. The day of the first true flight dawned with wind. Not a polite breeze, but a restless, circling wind that tugged at banners and rattled shutters, testing every seam of Lyron's spire. Aeralyn woke to the sound of it howling through the narrow vents of Corin's workshop, and her heart answered like a tuning fork. Today. She sat up too fast and winced as the harness edges bit into healing skin. The bandages were thinner now, the burns mostly closed, but scars pulled when she moved. The metal plate along her spine felt less alien than it had a week ago. Still heavy, but familiar, like a stubborn tool she'd used long enough to know its quirks. Across the room, Liessa blinked blearily from her chair, hair sticking up in a wild halo. "You have that look," Liessa mumbled. "The I'm about to do something reckless and historic look." Aeralyn tried to smother her grin, failed. "Corin says the arrays are stable. The council scheduled their review for next week. If we're going to prove this works before Taval turns it into a public hanging, today is our best window." Liessa groaned into her hands. "You two and your windows. You ever consider doors, stairs, reasonable slopes?" "Slopes don't get you this kind of view," Aeralyn said. "Help me up." Liessa sighed and stood, offering an arm. As she steadied Aeralyn, she leaned close. "If you die," she said softly, "I will drag your soul back from the veil and kill you again." "That's excessive," Aeralyn said. "That's love," corrected. Aeralyn squeezed her hand. The central dais had changed. Where before there had been bare frames, now the wings, her wings, unfurled in full. Filaments stretched between the dark steel ribs, not feathers, not membrane, but something between. Fine strands of spun starlight and tempered glass, crisscrossing in intricate patterns. In the right light, they were nearly invisible. In the wrong, they caught it all and threw it back in shards. They weren't a copy of Fey wings. They were a translation. Aeralyn stepped up onto the platform, breath shallow. Corin stood waiting, Gearling on his shoulder, both watching her. "How do they feel?" he asked, once she'd settled into position and the harness clicked home. She rolled her shoulders, muscles protesting. The wings responded with a slow, tentative unfurl, like a creature waking up. "Like I've grown lightning," she said, "and it's not sure if it likes me yet." "That's normal," Corin said. "The attunement between your channels and the filaments is still acquaintance level." Liessa, hovering at the bottom of the dais, made a face. "Please never describe magical integration like it's awkward small talk." "It is awkward small talk," Corin said, "between energies." Aeralyn laughed despite herself. The tightness in her chest loosened. Corin stepped into the circle. The runes around them flared in greeting, recognizing both signatures. "Last chance to change your mind," he said, meeting her gaze. She studied him, hair pulled back, torque gleaming at his throat, sleeves rolled, eyes steady. She felt him through the bond, focused, yes, but no longer shielded. His nervousness prickled under his calm, a mirror to her own. "I changed my mind about fear, not about flying." He held her eyes a heartbeat longer, then nodded. "Then let's give the city something worth whispering about," he murmured. The bond warmed as he reached for it, no longer a sharp new connection, but a well-worn channel. Aeralyn exhaled and let herself lean into it. She felt him brush his awareness along her edges, checking for strain, for instability. She let him see. No hiding, no flinching. "Open," he said softly. She opened. Their centers touched, her sun, his storm. The construct flared between them, the third point of their strange triangle, eager as ever. Aether flowed. The wings shivered, filaments brightening along their lengths. Sensation flooded into places her body had thought were gone. The ghost map of wings, now filled not with pain, but with something else. Pressure, balance, potential. Aeralyn gasped. "I've got you," Corin said. His voice echoed through the bond, a steadying thread. "Lean back, let them settle." She did. The wings spread wider in response, finding their arc. They weren't weightless. The harness still dug into anchored scars, but their lift offset enough that she felt buoyant, grounded and ungrounded at once. They spent the morning walking. Not flying, walking. Up the dais, down again, across the workshop, along the catwalks. Every step was a lesson. "Shift your weight before you turn," Corin said. "The filaments respond faster than muscles. They need a fraction of anticipation, or they overcorrect." "Stop thinking about them as separate," he said later. "They are part of your balance now." Every time you ask, "How do they move?" rephrase it to, "How do we move?" We. The word carried more weight each time he used it. By midday, Aeralyn could cross the entire length of the upper walkway without pitching sideways. Lysa clopped from below. "Look at that! My friend, no longer walking like a newborn deer." Aeralyn stuck her tongue out at her. The motion sent a ripple down the wings. The tips twitched. She grinned. Corin watched, a corner of his mouth quirking. The bond hummed with quiet satisfaction. "Ready?" he asked. Her stomach tightened. He tilted his head toward the far end of the workshop. The great door there stood closed, runes dormant. Beyond it lay the open air. The first real flight. Aeralyn swallowed hard. Fear curled low in her gut. But under it, stronger now, was something fiercer. "Yes," she said, and meant it. The outer balcony had never looked so far. Corin's workshop opened onto a narrow platform carved into the side of the spire, far below the high observatory, but above most residential tiers. The drop below was a long tumble of stone and air, broken only by smaller ledges and the distant suggestion of mist. Wind buffeted them as soon as the door swung wide, tugging at Aeralyn's hair, plucking at the filaments of her wings. They responded instinctively, flexing and tensing. She shivered. The sensation was so familiar and so strange she almost staggered. "Stay with it," Corin said, stepping out beside her. His own wings ruffled in the gust. "Let the currents map themselves." She closed her eyes for a moment and just felt. The aether wind slid along the filaments, turning their patterns into a tactile diagram in her mind. Pressure here, lift there, pockets of turbulence near the cliff face, smooth flows farther out. It wasn't identical to how her natural wings had sensed the air. It was more technical, less intuitive. But the bond bridged that gap, translating mechanical input into emotional instinct. Her fear eased. "Better?" Corin asked. "Better," she said. "You will not jump this time," he said. "You'll step. We'll glide first, then test controlled lift. No dives, no sharp turns, no showing off for stray children." "How dare you imply I would show off," she said. "The last time you flew, you nearly spun yourself into orbit to make a child laugh."
That was a different circumstance. You were still you, he said. She couldn't argue that. Lyessa stood just inside the doorway, arms wrapped around herself against the wind. "I hate this," she muttered. "I also believe in you. It's very confusing." Aeralyn smiled at her. "If it helps, I'm more terrified than you are." "It does not," Lyessa said. Gearling fluttered up to perch on the balcony rail, lenses whirring. "Observation mode," it chimed in its tiny clockwork voice. "Beginning visual record." Aeralyn blinked. "Did you give him a voice?" "He gave himself one," Corin said. "It was an accident." "No such thing," Gearling declared. Aeralyn laughed. The sound tasted like nerves and hope. "All right," Corin said, attention sharpening. "We'll go on 3. 1. Aeralyn reached for him through the bond before he could finish, not hesitating. Not this time. She opened wide. Fear poured through. So did trust. So did the sharp, aching longing to be in the air again. Corin took it all in without flinching. He fed back his own. Steady focus, protective urgency, a quiet thread of exhilaration he couldn't quite hide. 2, he said, voice softer now that they were already aligned. 3. They stepped off the edge together. For a heartbeat, gravity remembered the last time. It grabbed her with brutal familiarity, yanking her stomach up into her throat. Her mind flashed with fire and screaming metal. No. This time, the wings answered. Lift surged along the filaments as aether flooded the construct. The wings snapped wide in a single smooth arc, catching the wind like sails. Aeralyn's stomach flipped, but her body didn't follow. They held. She rose. Wind slapped her face, harsh and cold and perfect. The spire fell away beneath her. The balcony shrank to a tooth of stone. The city spread out in every direction, tiers and bridges fanning like petals, fae gliding in distant, colorful arcs. She wasn't falling. She was flying. A laugh ripped free of her chest, raw and stunned. "Don't say it," Corin said quickly, flying about a wing length away, his own feathers catching the light. She laughed harder. The wings adjusted instinctively, their smallest movements translated into sweeping corrections by the construct's logic. The bond thrummed. She felt Corin's relief like a wave. He'd trusted his calculations. He'd still doubted. Now that doubt disintegrated in the face of proof. "You did it," she thought. "We did," he returned. They circled the spire once in cautious arcs, Corin calling out small adjustments, Aeralyn implementing them. "Move your right wingtip a fraction. Tilt your shoulders. Let your hips follow the current." Each tweak refined the feedback loop between her instincts and the construct's responses. She'd expected it to feel clunky, artificial, like piloting a machine from inside her own skin.
Strange, wobbly, but undeniably hers. Below, far below, a group of fae on a public terrace pointed up. A few gasps drifted up on the wind. Aeralyn glimpsed their faces, shock, fascination, something like awe. For once, pity was nowhere in sight. "Again," she called to Corin, giddy. "Higher!" "Stay within band 3, he shouted back. "The upper currents are too unruly." "Band 3 is boring," she said. "Aeralyn." She grinned and banked sharper. The wings obeyed, too well. Lift spiked on the outer arc. For a dizzying instant she over-rotated, the horizon tilting dangerously. Panic flared. Corin's presence slammed into hers, not smothering, but reinforcing. He adjusted his own flight pattern, their motions syncing. He projected calm, fine-tuning the output from his end of the bond. Together they leveled. "Do not," he said through clenched teeth, "call band 3 boring until you master it." She swallowed, cheeks hot. "Sorry." "Don't apologize," he said. "Learn." She did. They traced wider loops, tested climbs, shallow dives. The wings held. Her scars ached, but in a distant, manageable way, like sore muscles after hard work. For the first time since the accident, she felt something close to joy. Uncomplicated, fierce, terrifying in its intensity. If this is all I ever get, she thought, it will be enough. It won't be all, Corin sent back, the thought fierce. We are barely beginning. She caught his eyes as they rose side by side along a column of warm air. Wind tore at his hair, loosened a few strands from their tie. He looked less like a prince, more like the artificer she'd seen in the workshop, focused, alive. The bond hummed. Something soft and dangerous unspooled between them. We should probably talk later about what this is, she thought before she could stop herself. His aura stuttered. Then, slowly, amusement edged in. Later, he agreed. The world tilted. Not because of her wings, because something deep beneath Lyran's spire shuddered. It started as a subtle tremor in the aether, a faint, sour note threading the currents. Aeralyn might have missed it if she'd been alone. Corin didn't. His attention snapped away from the joy of flight towards some distant, invisible point. His aura sharpened. "What is it?" she called, sensing his alarm before he said a word. He didn't answer immediately. The bond filled with rapid-fire calculations, drawn maps of arrays she'd only half learned. "A secondary crystal just failed," he said after a beat, voice clipped, "in the lower east conduit." "Here?" she asked, looking down at the glittering network of lights and paths. "In the city's infrastructure," he said, "not the workshop." Relief washed through her. Short-lived. Because a half-breath later, something else broke. This time, she felt it physically. The wind stuttered. Ether currents that had been smooth and predictable twisted without warning, like a rug yanked out from under her feet. Pressure shifted violently along the wings. Lift dropped on one side, spiked on the other. Aeralyn yelped as her body lurched. "What?" "The failure's feeding back into the upper conduits," Corin said, already diving toward her. "The currents are destabilizing." "Then we land," she said, trying to adjust. "Too late for a straight descent," he snapped. "We're above Band 4 now. The turbulence will tear you apart before you reach a stable lower stream." He was right. She felt it. Eddies forming in the ether, invisible storm fronts colliding. Uncontrolled magic made weather of its own. Panic clawed at her throat. "What do we do?" He didn't hesitate. "We ride it," he said. "That is not a reassuring answer." "You asked for honesty," he shot back. "We don't have time for lies." He was closer now, his natural wings beating strongly against the erratic wind. He reached through the bond and, without warning, poured more of himself into the connection. Aeralyn gasped as his presence flooded her. Their link, already open, widened to something raw and blazing. She felt his heart hammering, the sting of his overtaxed channels from the night before, the fierce focus he wore like armor. "Trust me," he sent, stripped of all his usual careful phrasing. She did something she'd never done fully before. She let go. Not of herself, but of the need to steer every moment alone. She softened her grip on control and let the bond carry more of her instincts into his hands. Their awareness braided. He angled his flight relative to hers, then, gently but decisively, took the lead in shaping how the construct interpreted the chaos. "Follow my vector," he said aloud and through the link. "Don't fight it. Adjust, don't resist." The wind hit them again, harder. A savage gust slammed into Aeralyn's left wing, trying to flip her. Her reflex was to pull against it, to lock her muscles. "No," Corin's thought cut through, firm. "Yield a fraction. Let it roll, then catch." She forced herself to obey, loosening the joints, letting the wing tilt instead of bucking rigid. The filaments flexed, bending just enough to avoid snapping. The turbulence rolled them both. For a terrifying second, sky and spire traded places. Then they caught the turn and rode it, sliding sideways through a pocket of churning air into a slightly calmer band. Aeralyn laughed, a strained, slightly hysterical sound. "You're insane." "We're alive," he said. "Aim for the next smooth patch, 2 degrees right, there." She didn't see what he saw, but she felt it, a thinner edge in the chaos, a thread of comparatively stable current.
They angled toward it together, adjusting continuously as new shockwaves rippled up from below. "What's causing it?" she shouted over the wind. "Chain failure," he gritted out. "Someone compromised more than one conduit. They're collapsing in sequence." "Tavel," she spat. "Most likely. Focus." His voice sharpened with urgency. "The next wave will be stronger." He was right again. A jag of wild aether surged up from below, a distorted column of force that twisted the air around it into a spiraling wall. It roared toward them like an invisible tornado. Aeralyn's bones screamed warning even before the construct translated the readings. "We can't cut through that," she said, throat dry. "No," Corin said. "We go with it." "Have you lost your mind?" "Temporarily," he said. "We let it take us up, then push off the rotational edge. Think of it as—" "Don't say fun experiment," she warned. "An aggressive updraft," he finished. The storm hit. For a second, Aeralyn couldn't breathe. The aether wall grabbed her wings and spun, tugging at every filament, trying to fling her apart. Her vision blurred, her stomach dropped out. Through the chaos, Corin's presence lashed to hers more tightly. "With me," he commanded, not harsh, but absolute. She clung to him like an anchor, not physically, but through the bond. He took the brunt of the calculations, adjusting their trajectory in micro-movements she couldn't have managed alone, using his experience with raw aether currents to turn disaster into momentum. They spiraled up. Higher than she'd ever flown, higher than she'd ever thought she'd dare. For one terrible, glorious instant, they crested the top of the surge. The world opened around them, spire below, sky above, clouds close enough to touch. The aether calmed for half a heartbeat. "Now," Corin said. They pushed. He angled his wings hard, leveraging the last of the updraft to fling them sideways out of the spin. Aeralyn mirrored him, the construct amplifying their intent, turning raw force into directed motion. They shot free of the spiral, tumbling into a relatively stable band of wind several levels above the city. Aeralyn hooped, stunned and breathless. "We did it!" "Don't celebrate yet," Corin said, but she felt his fierce, disbelieving joy. Below, the storm of unstable aether continued to churn, its edges licking at the lower bands. If it spread, it could damage more than infrastructure. It could hurt people. "We have to stabilize it," Aeralyn thought, horror dawning. "It's going to hit the residential tiers." "Already on it," Corin said. "There are emergency dampers built into the conduits. If I can trigger them remotely—" He broke off. A new wave of pain slammed through the bond. It wasn't hers. She cried out, clutching at her chest. "What?" "My channels," he hissed. "Overdrawn from last night. The surge." He trailed off, gritting his teeth against another spike. Aeralyn felt it all, the burn along his aether pathways, the flare of a too familiar backlash. He was still flying, still trying to manage the construct's output, but his control shook. If he faltered now, if the bond slipped, they'd lose the delicate balance keeping her wings from overloading. Her fear roared back, wild and choking, not of falling, of losing him, of the bond snapping under strain and leaving them both broken. "Aeralyn," he said, voice strange, "listen to me." "No," she said, rage and terror fiercer than the wind. "I'm not listening if you're about to say something noble and self-sacrificing." "We're too high," he forced out. "If I lose consciousness, the anchor goes. The wings, Then don't lose consciousness, she snapped. It's not... He broke off on a strangled sound. His presence flickered. The construct trembled, caught between their signatures. Aeralyn's mind raced. He'd anchored her, absorbed her fear, guided the flows. He'd been the larger vessel every time the energy surged too hot. But a soul bond wasn't a one-way channel. She could anchor him. It was absurd. She was the one who'd broken first during the ritual, the one who'd panicked, who'd nearly overloaded the construct. She was the broken thing he'd been trying to fix. Except she wasn't broken. Not like that. Not anymore. She thought of Lyasa's words, of standing in the observatory, telling him she could handle his ugly, of telling herself she wasn't a project. I'm the exception, the one who fixes you back. Aeralyn, he said again, weaker. If I sever the bond now, you might have enough attunement to glide down. No, she said, a snarl in her voice that surprised them both. You sever this bond, and I will personally haunt you for the rest of your very short life. That's not how haunting works. You're not dying, she said. Not like this. Not for me. Not for Tavel's sabotage. Not when I finally got you to admit you're repressed. He made a choked sound that might have been a laugh. She latched onto it like a rope. Give it to me, she said fiercely. The backlash, the overflow. Split it. You don't have to hold it all. Aeralyn, trust me, she said, and threw his own words back at him, hard and bright. You asked me to trust you in the circle? You demanded it. I demand it now. The bond flared. He hesitated. 1 second. 2. Then something inside him yielded. The next wave of pain didn't hit just him. It hit them both. Aeralyn screamed as raw aether tore along her channels, burning trails through pathways that weren't used to this kind of load. Her vision whited out. Every instinct screamed to slam shut, to shove it all back at him. She didn't. She held. She braced herself against him, using the stubborn core that had driven her to leap off balconies with untested inventions, the same streak of furious defiance that had carried her through waking up wingless and refusing to accept the ground as sentence. She anchored. Between them, the backlash split and dulled, still agonizing but survivable. The construct's shudder eased. "Come on," she gasped, tears ripped from her eyes by wind. "You're not the only one allowed to be strong in this relationship." "Relationship?" he echoed faintly, even as he bled power into the emergency damper sequence. "Interesting choice of—" "Shut up and stabilize things," she snapped. He did. Through the shared agony, she felt him reaching beyond their immediate bubble of chaos, along invisible lines of aether that crisscrossed the city. He traced them like nerves, seeking the right nodes. Each contact sent a spike of strain along his overtaxed channels. Each time, she took half. Found it, he thought. The primary east damper. Concentrate, she thought back. I'll keep us level. They swapped roles. She focused on the immediate, the wings, the wind, the precarious band of relative stability they rode. He focused on the broader, the city-wide flow, sending precise, agonizing pulses into the damper arrays. The first one engaged. A tremor ran through the aether below as the runaway surge hit a suddenly hungry sink. The spinning column faltered, frayed at the edges. "1," he panted. "2 more." "Why did you make 3?" she demanded, biting down on a wave of agony. "Redundancy," he said. "You mock my paranoia. It saves you." She couldn't argue. They found the second node, then the third. Each time, it hurt. Each time, she held. By the time the last damper engaged, she felt hollowed out, raw and shaking. The wings drooped, filaments dimming, as the construct idled to a safer level. Below, the aether storm guttered. Its wild column broke apart into strands of fading light, dissipating into harmless currents. The danger to the city eased. The danger to them did not.
Corin's presence stuttered. "Stay with me," she whispered. "Trying," he muttered. "We need to descend, before one of us actually does pass out." "Agreed," she said. They angled downward together, careful and slow. The currents were still rough, but nothing like before. Aeralyn adjusted the wings with what felt like the last scraps of her strength, following Corin's guidance, even as he flagged. They hit Band 3. Then 2. The city rose to meet them, towers and terraces, glinting glass. Distant shouts drifted up from Fae who'd seen the surge and their desperate dance above it. Aeralyn ignored them. "Where?" she asked, blinking sweat from her eyes. "Workshop balcony, straight ahead."
"Try not to crash this time." "High expectations," she muttered. They approached the familiar stone ledge. For a moment, Aeralyn's vision doubled, now and last time, balcony and fire. Her scars screamed. She faltered. Corin's presence tightened. "Look at me," he said. She did. His eyes were fixed on hers, even as he monitored a dozen other variables. The bond surged with one clear, unwavering intent. You are not falling. Not this time. Not alone. Her fear hit that intent and dissipated, like waves against rock. They touched down. It wasn't graceful. Aeralyn's knees buckled on impact. She half stumbled, half collapsed onto the stone. Corin landed beside her, only slightly more elegantly, catching himself on the wall with one hand. For a few seconds, neither of them moved. The wings sagged, scraping faintly against the balcony. Their hearts hammered, synchronized. Lyessa's shout reached them as if from far away. "Era! Corin!" Feet pounded. Then she was there, gearling fluttering frantically overhead. "You're insane," Lyessa said, voice shaking. "You're beautiful. You're both idiots. And you're insane." Aeralyn tried to answer. Only a breathless wheeze came out. Corin laughed, then winced, pressing fingers to his temple. Blood smeared where he touched his nose. "Oh, no, you don't," Lyessa snapped, grabbing his wrist before he could crumple. "If either of you collapses, it will be on a soft surface under my supervision, not on a drafty balcony like some melodramatic tragedy." "Bossy," Corin muttered, but didn't resist as she manhandled them inside. The next hour blurred into a haze of salves, poultices, diagnostic spells, and Lyessa's creative swearing. The high healer arrived in a flurry of robes not long after, drawn by the visible aether event. He fussed over Corin, then Aeralyn, then went back to Corin with growing exasperation. "You're both reckless," he scolded, "and lucky. You could have burned out half your channels." "We stabilized the surge," Corin said, voice hoarse. "The city." "The city would have survived one broken conduit," the healer snapped. "It would not have survived losing its only competent artificer and its most promising engineer in one day." Aeralyn blinked. "Most promising?" He glared at her. "Don't let it go to your head. Or do. Maybe it will anchor you when you fling yourself off things." Lyessa snorted. Eventually, after more muttering and a few reluctantly admiring glances at the wings, the healer left with strict orders. No heavy aether work for at least 2 days. No flight, no major bond strain. "Rest," he said, skewering them both with his gaze. "Or I will personally rope your wings to the nearest anvil." When they were finally alone, meaning Lyessa hovered just beyond a curtain, pretending not to eavesdrop, Aeralyn and Corin lay on adjacent cots facing each other. The workshop hummed softly. The bond hummed louder. "You're a terrible patient," Aeralyn said. "You are worse," Corin replied. Silence settled, heavy and full. "You let me in," he said at last, "when you could have pushed me out and saved yourself pain." "You let me share it," she countered, "when you could have hoarded it and called it protecting me." He studied her, eyes searching. Through the bond, she felt his hesitation, old, ingrained, but also something new, willingness. "I was wrong," he said quietly, "about the bond, about how to carry it. I thought I had to be more, so you could be less." She winced. "That's a terrible sentence. Please don't ever say it to anyone else." He huffed a weak laugh. "Duly noted." "You don't have to be more," she said. "You just have to be you, with me. Not in front of me, not instead of me, beside." "That is the most inefficient team structure I've ever heard," he said. "And yet, today, it worked." "It's almost like trust is a force multiplier," she said. He made a face. "Never use management language again." "Deal," she said. They looked at each other for a long moment. Through the bond, she felt his next thought before he formed it, a question, hesitant and bold at once. She answered before he spoke. "Yes," she said softly. His brows lifted just slightly. "To what?" "To whatever you're about to ask," she said. "As long as it's not, 'Do you want to jump off another balcony today?'" The corner of his mouth curved. Impressive predictive accuracy. "It's the bond," she said, "and the fact that you're very transparent when you're not repressing." He inhaled, steadying himself. "Then let me ask it plainly," he said. "Today, up there, that was more than experimentation. It was reckless," she supplied. "Transformative," he said. Her cheeks warmed. "Transformative how?" "Together, we did something impossible," he said. "Not just flight, not just stabilizing the surge. We balanced each other. I have spent years trying to fix broken systems alone, trying to be the larger vessel, as you phrased it. I did not know how to let someone else hold the other end." "And now?" she asked quietly. "And now, I find I do not want to go back," he said simply. The bond trembled with the honesty of it. "Aeralyn," he went on, "when the time comes to sever the ritual bond, when the wings are fully yours, you should know, I do not want that to be the end of our connection." Her heart stuttered. "Are you sane?" she flailed for words.
"You want to, what? Sign a long-term engineering contract?" He stared. Then, to her astonishment, laughed outright, a hoarse, tired sound full of genuine amusement. "Yes," he said, "among other things." She swallowed. "What other things?" He sobered, though humor still warmed his gaze. "I would like," he said carefully, "for our bond to become something chosen, not just necessity, not just artifice, but us, us." The word landed in her chest like a seed finding soil. She thought of the first time she'd woken wingless, convinced her life was over, of stepping into the circle, of the fear and the fights and Lyesa's relentless commentary, of the wind on her face that morning, of Corin's presence filling the emptiness she'd carried even before the accident. She could have pretended, deflected, made a joke. She didn't. "I want that too," she said, voice steady despite the tremble in her hands. "I don't know what shape it takes yet, but yes." Relief flooded the bond so strongly she almost laughed. He'd been braced for refusal, for her to call it a side effect, for her to choose the sky and not him. "Fool," she thought fondly. "You may need to get used to people staring," she added. "The Fae with mechanical wings and the Prince of Broken Things is quite a gossip pairing." "Let them stare," he said. "People always watch the first ones who dare something new. That's how they decide if they will follow." "Do you think they will?" she asked. He considered. "Some will hate it," he said. "Some will fear it. Some will pretend not to care and secretly reconfigure their worldviews at night. And some, wounded, grounded, pushed aside, will see you and realize they are not limited to what they were told." His gaze sharpened, pride and tenderness mixing in a way that made her throat tight. "You will not just fly, Aeralyn Starfell," he said softly. "You will change what flight means." Tears stung her eyes. That's a lot of pressure to put on one fae with a talent for exploding things. That's why you won't do it alone, he said. She reached across the narrow space between their cots. He met her halfway. Their fingers twined. The touch was simple. The bond made it not simple at all. Warmth surged through their joined hands, echoing along the link. Not the searing heat of backlash, not the sharp flare of crisis. Something gentler, steady, like the glow of coals banked for a long night. A promise. He hesitated. She didn't. She shifted closer, ignoring Lyesa's faint gasp from beyond the curtain, and pressed her forehead to his. Their noses bumped awkwardly, their laughter mingled, breath hitching. "Is this allowed under healer's orders?" she said. "He didn't say anything about not doing this," she said. "Technicality," Corin said approvingly.
She inhaled, taking in the scent of him. Metal, ozone, something faintly like cedar. The bond hummed contentedly. "Corin," she whispered. "Yes?" "Next time we fly," she said, "we do it because we want to, not because the city is falling apart." His smile ghosted against her lips. "Agreed. Also," she added, "I get to choose the first place we go." "Demanding," he said. "Consensually," she replied. His shoulders shook with silent laughter. "Where will you choose?" he asked. She pictured it easily. The highest spires, beyond the constricting circles of court-approved flight paths. The open sky above the cloud line, where stars felt close enough to pluck. "You'll see," she said. The bond thrummed again, brighter. Outside, beyond stone and gear and copper, Lyran's spire creaked and settled after the aether storm. Somewhere in its depths, Lord Taval fumed over a plan interrupted. Inside, two fae lay exhausted and aching and more alive than either had been in a long time. They had survived the leap. What came after? Council, politics, choices, would be its own kind of plunge. But for now, in the quiet hum of the workshop, Act 4 ended, not with falling, not with fire, but with fingers intertwined and a future hanging in the balance. For the first time, that future felt like something they could shape together. Not prince and subject, not broken and fixer. Partners. And maybe, if they were brave enough to say it aloud, something more. Aeralyn had never seen the council chambers so full. Golden tiers of seats curved around the central platform like a half-bloomed blossom, every petal crowded with fae officials in shimmering silks and stiff ceremonial armor. High windows cast morning light in fractured rainbows across polished stone. The air buzzed with whispered speculation about the aether storm, about the prince's involvement, about the fae girl wearing mechanical wings. Mostly about the wings. Aeralyn stood beside Corin at the center dais, Lysa a step behind them with an expression that promised she was ready to throw herbs or insults if things went poorly. Gearling perched on a pillar above, swiveling its head aggressively at anyone who looked too smug. Lord Taval stood across the circle, robes pristine, smiles sharp as glass. "We convene," announced High Counselor Malus, her voice rippling across the chamber with magical amplification, "to examine the matter of Prince Corin Valor's experimental artificing and its potential threat to the stability of Lyran's spire." A murmur rippled. "And," she added dryly, "to determine whether Miss Aeralyn Starfell is, in fact, about to destroy the city with her wings." Half the chamber stiffened. Aeralyn lifted her chin. Corin didn't move, but his aura tightened through their bond, a coiled readiness, protective, steady. She reached through and brushed his awareness, a silent promise. "I'm with you." He answered in kind, "As I am with you." Malus gestured. "Lord Taval, present your concerns." Taval stepped forward, dripping righteousness. "Honored council," he began, "we stand at a precipice. The prince, our prince, has engaged in reckless experimentation involving unstable aether constructs. constructs which have already resulted in explosions, infrastructure damage, and uncontrolled magical surges, all to indulge the whims of a single fae. Aeralyn opened her mouth, but Corin's hand brushed hers through the bond, a calm pressure. Not yet. Taval continued, pacing with deliberate grace. Natural wings are sacred, a gift woven into our very being. To replace them with machinery, to fuse soul and gear, is to invite corruption into our bloodline. This bond the prince speaks of is a dangerous perversion of ancient magics. Laes's sharp inhale behind Aeralyn was almost a hiss. Corin's voice cut through the chamber like a blade. Ancient magics, he echoed, stepping forward, that you have attempted to harness illegally for your own power. A ripple, a gasp. Taval's smile faltered. Malus arched an eyebrow. Prince Corin? Explanation? Corin lifted a crystal from his pocket, fractured and blackened at the core. This, he said, projecting his voice, is the stabilizing crystal Lord Taval tampered with. The first of 3 he sabotaged. Had we not intervened mid-flight, he gestured to Aeralyn, a cascade failure would have ravaged the eastern tiers. The chamber erupted. Shock, denial, whispers like crackling fire. Taval's composure cracked, then smoothed. You claim sabotage, yet where is your proof that I... Gearling swooped down from its perch, mechanical beak clicking and projecting an illusion into the air. A recording of the night Corin found the cracked crystal. The sabotage runes glowed clearly, distinct, unmistakable. Runes bearing Taval's signature. The illusion dispersed. Silence reigned. Malus turned slowly to Taval. Would you like to revise your statement? Taval's mouth opened, closed. He glared at Aeralyn. This girl has bewitched the prince. Oh, for moon's sake, Aeralyn muttered. Can we retire that cliché? It's older than the spire. A few counselors snorted. Taval went purple. The sabotage, Malus said sharply. Explain it. I acted, Taval spat, veneer collapsing, to prevent an abomination from taking root. We cannot allow this machine-winged hybrid to redefine what it means to be fae. Aeralyn stepped forward before Corin could stop her. Lord Taval, she said, voice steady as hammered steel. I lost my wings in an accident. You act like that made me less, like I should have stayed broken to make you comfortable.
Her wings unfurled behind her, glimmering, elegant, breathtaking. A ripple of awe moved through the room. These wings didn't corrupt me, she said. They saved me, not because they look like what I used to have, but because they gave me back choice, agency, future. She glanced at Corin. His pride shone like a second sunrise behind his eyes. I didn't choose this bond to defy tradition, she continued. I chose it because I wanted to build towards something new, and because I trusted the person building it with me. She felt him, through the bond, go still in a way that meant he was feeling everything she said. These wings, she finished, aren't the end of what we are. They're the beginning of what we can be. The chamber was quiet, not tense, thoughtful. Malus leaned forward. Prince Corin, are these wings dangerous? Only, Corin said, if sabotage continues. Are they stable? He looked at Aeralyn with something akin to wonder. Yes. Do you intend, Malus said, to continue this project? Aeralyn's heart caught. Corin didn't answer immediately. He stepped closer to Aeralyn, not touching, but the bond pulsed with certainty. I intend, he said, to finish it with her. Her breath hitched. And the soul bond? Malus asked. Corin's voice gentled. Temporary for safety. Permanent only if mutually chosen and outside council jurisdiction. Gasps, raised eyebrows, Lord Taval's horrified sputtering. Aeralyn blinked rapidly. That was Bold. I have been repressing for a very long time, he murmured. Aeralyn's lips twitched. So this is the new you? I am, he said softly, inspired. Maelis tapped her staff. The council finds Lord Taval guilty of sabotage and dereliction. Effective immediately, he is stripped of rank and authority. Cheers erupted from parts of the chamber. Taval screamed. Lyessa cackled. As for Miss Starfell, Maelis went on, the council hereby acknowledges her mechanical wings as a sanctioned extension of her person. She is to be given full rights of mobility and flight within the spire and beyond. Aeralyn's knees nearly buckled. And Prince Corin, Maelis added, you will submit your designs and safety protocols for archival to be considered for future use, should others require such gifts. Aeralyn's breath caught. Others. The injured, the grounded, the overlooked. This wasn't just about her. Corin bowed. I will. Maelis's voice softened, just barely. The world changes, Corin Valor. Better to shape it. The council session adjourned. Aeralyn barely had time to process before Lyessa barreled into her with a sobbing laugh hug. You did it! You spoke in front of every fancy hat in the city and didn't die. I almost threw up, Aeralyn admitted. You didn't, Lyessa said proudly. Growth. Corin approached, his aura calm now, warm even.
Aeralyn, she turned to him. Everything around them, crowd, noise, politics, fell away. We did it, he said softly. We, she echoed. I like that word. Good, he said, barely smiling, because I intend to use it often. Her breath hitched. Corin, he extended a hand, formal in posture, playful in his eyes. Fly with me? She blinked. Here? In front of… Yes, he said simply. She took his hand. They rose from the balcony platform outside the council chamber, wings shimmering as they snapped open. Gasps and cheers erupted below. Aeralyn and Corin lifted together, a joined arc of sunlit metal and pale feathers. The wind caught them, and the bond surged bright, higher, up through the spiraling currents around the spire, past the highest terraces, past the observatory, into the open sky she dreamed of since the accident. Above the cloud line, the world stretched endless, blue and gold and vast. Aeralyn inhaled. The wind tasted like freedom and metal and possibility. Corin hovered beside her, eyes reflecting sky. You chose this, he said quietly. Not because you had to, because you wanted to. I did, she said. And the bond? He asked, voice gentler than the wind. When the wings no longer need my anchor, do you want to keep it? Aeralyn looked at him, really looked. At the artificer-prince who had saved her life. At the man who had held her fear and shared his own. At the storm and the stillness and the quiet longing she had felt even when he tried to hide it. She reached through the bond and offered not fear, not desperation, but warmth, trust, something soft and brave. Yes, she whispered, but not as an anchor, as a partner. He exhaled, something breaking open in him like dawn. They drifted closer, wings brushing, foreheads touching. The wind carried them gently. Below, the spire gleamed. Above, the sky waited. And Aeralyn Starfell, Fey engineer, survivor, maker of miracles, took her first free flight with the man who had become her equal in every way. No falling, no fire, only rising. Together.